period which he had to suffer because of them. And so he was an outlier in the society. As a result, he was particularly never became famous during his lifetime. But then, anyhow, people came to know more about Shelley's works after his death. Shelley was a very close and intimate friend to writers like Lord Byron, and then Thomas Love Peacock and Leigh Hunt. Anyhow, there is a special person in his life, his wife Mary Shelley, who is the author of the work Frankenstein. Shelley actually is said to have got drowned in a boat accident in the year 1822 on July in the month of July in the year 1822. But then people say that it was not accidental, but he must have committed suicide because of certain disheartenedness which he had at that time. The best known works of Shelley can be named thus: the very well known poem Ode to the West Wind, Ozymandias, Music to a Skylark. We have The Cloud, The Mask of Anarchy, and then we have When Soft Voices Die. There are certain long poems also like Alastor. We have Queen Mab, Adonais, The Triumph of Life, and The Revolt of Islam. These can be mentioned as the most important works of Shelley. Shelley contributed several essays on the topic of vegetarianism also. And there are two chief works that can be quoted here. One is On the Vegetable System of Diet, and the second is Vindication of Natural Diet. Coming to the title of the poem, Ode to the West Wind. What's an ode? Let us know first. What's an ode? Ode is a Greek formal public invocation in the ancient world. It is in fact a long poem that was chanted or else performed on religious occasions or religious or ceremonial occasions, especially that carried importance. Odes composed by Pindar and Horatian ode can be found in this poem, Ode to the West Wind, written by P.B. Shelley. Harold Bloom says that he has employed both the kinds of odes, that is, Pindaric odes as well as Horatian odes. One important thing is that human achievements were praised in the Pindaric odes in the poem, whereas personal and thoughtful feelings were expressed in the Horatian ode. In the poem, Shelley merges both the ideas, that is, both human achievements as well as personal and thoughtful feelings. He clubs both. He merges both the ideas. The ode was more like a tool for expressing the grandeur or as the majestic sentiments of the intellectual people or the spiritual concerns in the English tradition. Ode to the West Wind, let's now look into the form. Ode to the West Wind consists of 5 sections, or we can say cantos, written in terza rimo. Each section has 4 tercets. Tercets in the sense there are 3 lines in each stanza. There will be 4 stanzas like this, and then after that there is a couplet. It's a rhyming couplet. Thus the ode is written in iambic pentameter. The 3 sections describe the wind's effects. We all know when what happens when a strong wind blows. So the poem describes when the wind blows, the effects of the wind on the air, the earth, and on the ocean in the poem's first portion. The poem then addresses the wind directly in the final 2 sections requesting with it to hoist him up and make him his traveling friend or companion. The poem concludes on a positive note, stating that if the winter days are here, then spring will not be far behind. This is a very famous quote from the poem Ode to the West Wind. Now, if we look into the gist of the poem, we can understand after reading it that it's a condensed version. Whatever is given to us is a condensed version of 1819 poem by Shelley. And he writes about the effects of west wind as discussed already in the poem. And there's a feeling of hopefulness that if at all the winter days are here, well, spring is not far behind. In the autumn of the poet's life, he wrote this poem in the forest outside of Florence, which is in Italy. The poet opens the poem by requesting the autumn's ferocious west wind. It's very powerful. He takes note of the west wind's effect on the fallen leaves and the seeds actually that it spreads because of falling of the seeds. As a result, the seeds will be automatically nurtured again during the summer, during the spring. We know that the seeds become tender plants, which again will become big. As a result, the wind is described by the poet as both the destroyer as well as the preserver. Look at those two terms, destroyer as well as the preserver. He implores it to pay attention to him by explaining how the wind is the cause of violent storms. We all know how the storms take place and what kinds of destruction do take place when there are huge storms. In the process of getting its attention, he now describes the west wind in detail. He says, for example, he talks about the strange things that the wind can do. The wind can do anything. It can create huge water waves in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic seas. It can also see that it brings hope in the future that he would be able to hear from them. Now, the poet reveals the charming, young, or youthful friendship with the west wind. He tries in the initially itself, he mentions that he would like to become a close friend of the west wind. He aspires to be a wilted leaf or a fast cloud, which would actually allow him to feel the strength of the west wind. The poet prays to the west wind to transform him into an ocarina of sound. As a result, his remarks will be dispersed like a leaf in the wind, affecting the people all over the world. In addition, he asks the wind to take the form of him, take on the form of him. The final question is that if winter will arrive even before spring comes, and closes with that statement, leaving us in a question, leaving us a rhetorical question to answer for ourselves. As a result, he makes use of the concept of birth and the death. That is why we have the two important words, destroyer as well as the preserver, describing the qualities of the west wind. As a result, death and again degradation do not signal the end of life, but rather the beginning of a new life. Like we can put it another way also, like he believes that because winter and spring are diametrically opposite to one another, they cannot coexist, they cannot take place at one point of place or time. One should end, the other should begin. So this is what he does. Therefore, he says, winter is about to end and then spring will now spring up. Furthermore, he claims that his degeneration is nothing new, but is inescapable. That means one has to die and then there will be again rebirth. In Ode to the West Wind, there are certain important themes like power. human limitations, and the natural environment. Despite his admiration for the west wind's strength, he knows that west wind is very powerful, very strong. He says he admires the strength of the west wind, but then the poet desires that revolutionary ideals may spread throughout the cosmos. Let's look into certain important parts of the poem. Let's analyze. Like, there is a use of figure of speech called metaphor. When he says, "Oh, wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being." Look at what he is comparing to. He says, wild, it is, west wind is wild. The breath of autumn's being. It compares the west wind with a breath of autumn without using the words like or as. So the figure of speech is metaphor. How is nature presented in Ode to the West Wind? How is nature presented? By Shelley, in the poem Ode to West Wind, nature is grandeur. It's awesome. It's powerful. It's powerful than man actually can hope to be. Man may think that there might be some limitation of power of West Wind, but then it is beyond. The natural world is especially powerful because it contains the elements like the west wind and the spring wind, which can even travel anywhere across the globe. It could even affect a moving cloud, a tiny leaf, or wave, and wherever these go. The poem begins with 3 sections, as discussed already. The poet is trying to tell us the effects of west wind on earth, air, and also ocean. Thus, Ode to the West Wind is a poem by Shelley in which the speaker treats the west wind as a force of death and decay, destruction. But then again, this is nothing but welcoming the death, welcoming the decay. But at the same time does not mean the end of life or end of world, but then it is regeneration and rebirth that will actually come very soon. What is it the poet is conveying to us through the poem? The west wind shows the natural way of seasons. Seasons are quite natural. They're the natural happenings. One wind might bring destruction, but the same wind can also bring new life. It has both the power to take away the life and also give new into its place. The poet has an optimistic view on how things will turn out in the end, and then still, and yet he knows that spring will return. There is no end to human life. Of course, this is nothing but a hope on how we are going to live. What's the rhyme scheme of the poem? The poem has 5 sonnets, and each consists of 4 triplets, and finally we have a couplet, which we have seen already. And we have already noticed that there is the usage of terzo rima. There are triplets with the rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, B, C, D, C, and D, E, D. And finally, we have a couplet. As we have seen, there are 2 lines, which is E, E. What's the poet asking the west wind? The speaker invokes the west wind of autumn, which actually is scaring away the dead leaves and spreads the seeds so that they might be nurtured in the spring season. And says that the wind is here, both the destroyer as well as the preserver. So we can understand in this poem that Shelley shows his optimistic view. Nothing can die, and then one has to take rebirth. So this is what is the destruction as well as destroyer's role that actually is played by the west wind. But then again, we can see that a new life is formed. That means we have to be optimistic in our thoughts. There might be difficulties in our life, but then they are not eternal. They fade away with the passage of time, and then there will be a hope of having the good times ahead. Now let's move on to the next poem, John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. John Keats was also an English romantic poet of the second generation, along with Lord Byron and Shelley. He is best known for his works, especially the Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to a Nightingale, and his long poem Endymion. We have an important statement. Beauty is truth and truth is beauty. This has come from this poem. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. Eternal beauty, then there is the truth. That is the truth. This statement has made him a precursor of aesthetism. Now, what is he known for? What is Keats known for? Keats is known for romantic poetry, known for his search for perfection of poetry and also using of vivid imagery. His poems are recognized as some of the best in the English language. He was born on 31st October 1795 in London, England, and he died at the age of 25 years itself on February 23rd, 1821 in Italy, in the place of Rome. He had his education at King's College, London. There are certain selected works of him which are memorable. They are Sleep and Poetry, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to a Nightingale, Hyperion, and Endymion. Please remember these important works. The most important and notable quote, as I repeat, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. And that is all you know on earth and all you need to know, that truth is beauty and beauty is truth. Keats often juxtaposed the comic and the seriousness in his poems. Actually, they don't look primarily funny. There were his fellow romantics, his friends, but then Keats struggled because of the legacy of the prominent poets who were existing during that period, even before him, like something like, seniority, seniors. So he had been attacked because of them, by them. They retained those poets who were existing earlier to Keats. They oppressed him, that actually had obstructed or hindered the liberation of his imagination. Milton is the most notable figure of his times. Romantics both worshipped him and at the same time tried to distance themselves from him. So we can see that because of a kind of pressure on him, he had to keep himself in isolation. His first Hyperion displayed Miltonic influences. Critics saw that this might have been, that is, Hyperion must have been written by John Milton, such a great person. But then they found that it was written by none other than John Keats. No one else can do that. Keats died at a young age of 25, with only a 3-year-long writing career. However, he left a substantial body of work that makes him recognized, or we can say that he is a poet of promise. His mystic was also heightened by humble origins, as he presented his low life, simple life, and someone who received a sparse education. Shelley, in his work Preface to Adonais, described Keats as delicate, fragile, and blighted in the bud. These are the 3 terms that Shelley, in fact, used for Keats. He also said that Keats is a pale flower by some sad maiden cherished. He died on the promise of the fruit. So even before he became so very familiar like other poets, he died. Now, if we look into the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, which is written by John Keats, we can understand that it's an attempt by Keats with the beauty of art and nature. He addresses a piece of pottery. It's simple, it's a simple pot, description of a pot. Urn is a pot. So he addresses a piece of pottery from ancient Greece. Keats is perhaps the most famous person for using odes such as this one, as well as the Ode to Nightingale. Probably he became famous because of these two poems. This poem shows the poetic deal with the expressive nature of music. The urn itself is very ancient, very old one. As I repeat, urn is a pot. So the entire description is about a beautiful painting that is found on a pot, which is an old one. It's been passed down over the millennia. Generations have been passing. Finally, it would reach Keats' presence and then seems to exist outside of the traditional sense of time. It's ageless, it's immortal, but it is almost alien in its distance from the current period. We can't say it. It's sometime, very, very long back. It belongs to very old time. This poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats, its focus is on a Grecian urn, a type of ancient pottery in Greece, and especially the urn or as the pot is engraved, beautifully depicting certain beautiful things which we will be seeing very soon. In this poem, Keats, or as we can say the speaker, whoever it is, it can be the speaker or it can be the poet himself. Keats mulls over the strange idea of human figures. There are certain human figures that are carved into the urn. There is a carving on the urn. One can find human beings, trees, pots, and what more. There's much more to describe. They are paradoxical figures, like both man and woman. They are free from constraints. There are no limitations. Just imagine there's a pot and there's a beautiful painting or carving on the pot. Just imagine this to get a rough sketch of what the writer tells us. The influences of time, no influences of time, no constraints, and these are paradoxical figures, as said already, man and woman. But at the same time, they are imprisoned in an exact moment. That means when we are having a vision in front of our eyes, or else in our thoughts about a beautiful urn which is carved with men and women, beautiful trees, everything, like looking lively in front of us as if there's a movie rolling on. Just imagine an urn like this. It is transfixed before our very eyes. It is that exactly that is taking place at that very moment. For all, they don't have to worry about anything like growing old, or they may die, or they cannot experience the life. Nothing of this sort. It is just like a rest for the humanity. The poem Ode on a Grecian Urn represents three attempts at engaging with the urn and its beautiful scenes. Across the stanzas, Keats tries to tell us who are those figures, who those figures are, what are they doing, what are they representing, what are the underlying meanings of the text or the images that are being shown in the lyrics that the poet uses. By the end of the poem, he realizes that the entire process is something like a process of questioning, and it is fairly redundant. Let's look into the poem. The title of the poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn, gives the readers, to us, the central idea at the first hand. It is a poetic representation of a piece of art, especially it's so beautiful. The paintings are so beautiful on a Grecian urn. The poetic persona has encountered them or the urn with absolute and utter astonishment. He's surprised, the poetic persona is surprised with a beautiful carving on the urn. He is in fact astounded or surprised by the artist who has done all this and by the one who has created this everlasting peace. The depictions on the vase, or else, the pot, raise several questions on the onlooker's mind. Through this poem, Keats' persona describes it so beautifully. In the end, he says, this is what is called the everlasting beauty of art. That is how the statement beauty is truth and truth is beauty has come up. Let's look into the structure first. Like other series of Keats' poetry, especially from great odes of 1819, Ode on a Grecian urn builds on a specific structure. There are 5 stanzas, and each stanza has got 10 lines, and it is written in iambic pentameter. The rhyme scheme is split into 2 parts. Like there are finally 3 lines of each stanza that have certain variations. For the first 7 lines, the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, D, E. And then we have got C, D, E, which is actually taken as a stance. In the verse 1, that is in stanza 1, the final 3 lines are D, C, E. And in the second verse, we have C, E, D. This gives the piece of the poem a great feel, a great vigor, strength, adding a sense of deliberation to the final lines of each and every verse while still adhering to the form. The major literary devices, let's look into the major literary devices, what the poet uses here in this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. The first thing is metaphor. Poet uses metaphors in this poem. He says, unravished bride of quietness. Unravished bride of quietness. Look there. There is one more. Foster, child of silence and slow time. Child of silence and slow time. We have also got paradox, opposite in view. The poet refers to the Grecian urn from 3 perspectives. He says, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. When one wins, he'll have happiness, but then we have here the word like grief, sadness. So paradoxical, opposite. She cannot fade, though has not thy bliss. So one can say that there is bliss, but then at the same time she cannot fade. She cannot fade, but then thou has not thy bliss, not seen any happiness, but then at the same time she cannot fade. We have then alliteration. Alliteration, we have consonants with the first letters repeating. Like for example, leaf-fringed legend. Look at those 2 letters, L and L. And then we have your soft pipes play on, pipes and play. P, the letter P is getting repeated. We have one more alliteration, heart, high, sorrowful, heart and high. We have the most important thing, which is a rhetorical question. There are certain rhetorical questions, like, for example, the poet uses these words. He says, what men or gods are these? It's a question, in fact, rhetorical question. The poet is actually using a clever trick here. Under the guise of having the speaker try to figure out what's on the pictures. Are they gods or are they human? Are these men? What's it exactly? So he is keeping us, occupied with certain preoccupied thoughts. The speaker repeats the question about deities or gods or mortals. Men are mortal. So he asks, looking at those images on the urn or the pot, the poet is asking us question. Are they deities? That means gods, because they're looking permanent. Or are these mortals? None other than men. What exactly are they? So such rhetorical questions are also found. Looking into the themes, well, Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn is going to concentrate or focus on the themes of immortality of art, beauty, and imagination. These three are eternal, permanent. They are immortal. Art is immortal. Art never dies. So does beauty and imagination. Likewise, romanticism. The main theme of this poem is immortality of art. Art never fades. Art never dies. To depict the theme, Keats uses a Grecian urn and also emotive paintings on the small piece of pot. Each painting invokes in us certain complex emotions and in the speaker's mind too, as well as to us also. He expresses his thoughts. He expresses his thoughts regarding the depiction, certain ideas. By doing this, he tries to portray the everlasting or else the immortality of art on this special pot. Keats contrasts art with humans to portray that art never fades away. Art exists forever, though the artist is not going to be there. Though the artist is not going to be there, art still lives. That is how we are seeing the paintings or wonderful art. And then even what about these poems? We are reading them even today. So art, imagination, romanticism, these will never die. The poet tries to tell us that nature and beauty are integral part of life. And this is what makes actually the central idea of this ode. Now let's focus on the gist of the poem. The poet initially begins describing the Grecian urn. He sees a Grecian urn which has not been affected by the onslaught of time. Time has been passing away. It's fading. Time is fading. Time is passing. But then it looks as if the urn is looking fresh, freshly made, looking lively. And it looks as if the urn has not been affected by the lap of time. The urn gives the record of a past age more graphically than the poetry. Its borders are encircled with garlands of leaves. The poet asks whether the figures that are found on the urn are related to gods or men, whether they are the form of a temple or Arcadia, whether the maidens are trying to escape the pursuit or the chase of their mad lovers. So one can see that there are guys who are chasing the women or else the girls, and it looks like, men chasing their girls. It looks that the images are about the musicians who are playing on their pipes and timbrels. In fact, in the biblical meaning, these timbrels specifically are something that are related to spiritual God. It's not actually a stringed instrument. Neither is it a wind instrument like a pipe, but it is made with a skin, and it could be played like a continuous stringed instrument. Moreover, the sound is graver, that is to say serious and also deeper than the sound of a stringed instrument. So one can see the images of men and women and then musician playing with on the stringed and unstringed instruments, that is specifically to say pipes and timbrels. So it looks as if men are chasing their women, and it looks like a never-ending love on the Grecian urn. The music that is actually listened by the spirit is sweeter than the music heard by the physical or the sensual ears. Ours are physical ears, sensual ears, but then it is the heart that in fact is hearing this music. The youth represented on the urn are seen to be playing on the pipe And this will always go on and on, playing under the tree, which will never seem to end. This tree is never going to shed its leaves because it is eternal. It's a poetry, it's an art form. It will never die. There's no end to, the brightness of this creation urn. There is never any diminishing of the brightness of this creation urn. This art is transfixed. It's beautiful. And it looks like the lover who is actually pursuing hotly his girl, in chase of his girl, that will never succeed in either catching and kissing her. It looks as if he is continuously chasing her in order to have a kiss from her, but then it looks like an eternal way of searching for that. There's no end to that. But then he need not be sad. The lover need not be sad because he will never stop to love her. He feels that his beloved will be with him always. That beloved is always very lovely one. Next comes stanza 3 with the trees that are sculptured on the urn. They will remain like this forever. They will remain in their spring's freshness, and the musician will continue to pipe his new songs without being tired. Just imagine a pot with a beautiful painting on it. All these images are painted, they're sculptured already. So this is what is the poet trying to show us. The warmth of the young man's love will never cool down. In the fourth stanza, the poet sees an artificial, it's something like, it's not artificial, it's a natural procession. It's a procession that is depicted on the earth. There's a procession moving on. People are moving. To our naked eye, we can imagine a procession anyhow. It is artificial. But then to the poet who is describing to us about a procession that is going on, it's a movement. People are walking. People are moving in a crowd. There's a crowd of people moving. And then there is also a priest who is leading all these people. There are garlands to the sacrificial altar. The crowd might have come from the same town, or by the river, or by the seashore, or a mountain, whatever. But there is a crowd of people, and there's a priest headlong. The town must have become empty because all the people are here in this movement, in the crowd. But then it must ever remain empty. The town must remain empty forever because all the people are here on the urn. Look at this wonderful, wonderful description. In stanza 5, the poet says, the urn is a genuine specimen of Greek art. It's sculptured with a number of men and maidens, branches of trees and weeds. This, in fact, seduces us from the ordinary life of thought into, this is a kind of life. The thought of life is taking us into an extraordinary life of imagination. All that appears to our naked eyes is something different when compared to what the poet is talking to us about. It will continue to exist forever, even when the present generation will die out, or else this will go on even in the midst of the sufferings which are not known to us. The poem will teach us the lesson that beauty and truth are eternal and they are identical to one another. This is what actually we ought to know. The ode on the Grecian urn is one of the finest odes of Keats, in which he shows the Hellenic structure. What is Hellenism? The poet is trying to show us his Hellenism. Hellenism is a term that is used to describe the influence of Greek literature, Greek culture on people, especially on the Greek and Roman empires that have been conquered or interacted with. Jews came back from exile in Babylon and they endeavored to protect their national identity by closely following this concept of Hellenism. And Keats' poetry has full of his Hellenism. The Greek spirit was reincarnated in him so much that Shelley was impelled to say he was Greek. Shelley said about Keats, he was a Greek. The ode on a Grecian urn reveals his Hellenism most fully. The subject is an urn. It's all about a relic of ancient Greek sculpture. The urn is embossed with the human figures, which are marked by the animal vitality of the ancient Greeks and with beautiful scenes that actually produce the ancient Hellenic life. There are religious rituals, there is animating faith, and there is Greek sense of beauty and Greek sensuousness that in fact mark the ode. Despite all his Hellenism, Keats actually and essentially is a romantic writer. In this ode, he escapes into a world of art. He takes us also along with him into this world of art, and which has caught the ancient Greek life in its unfading and undestroyable beauty. This beauty never fades away. This beauty never gets destructed. The spot with its beautiful painting is permanent, eternal. This is what we are going to see even after, like generations pass. This poem remains the same even after years and years away, even after several years from now. So now this is all about Keats' great the Ode on a Grecian Urn. Coming to the last poem for the day, Alfred Lord Tennyson's work, Ulysses. Tennyson was the most renowned poet of the Victorian era. He became famous with his work In Memoriam and the other works such as The Charge of the Light Brigade and Idylls of the King. He was there when Queen Victoria was ruling, and then he became the poet laureate from the years 1850 until his death in the year 1892. His long narrative poem named The Princess, which was written in 1847, remained his notable work. But then again, the next important work, In Memoriam, which is written thinking about his lost friend Arthur Hallam in the year 1850, gave him most prominent place in the literature. There's a beautiful statement here. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. It's okay if we love and then die, but then if a person does not love at all, then what's the use? That is the meaning of this. This incorporation of the statement by Tennyson shows his sorrowfulness about his friend Arthur Hallam. His death, that is Arthur Hallam's death, has disturbed him the most. This statement has greatly impressed the readers and won Tennyson many admirers. Tennyson composed Ulysses. It's a very, very important poem. When Tennyson, like Keats, had suffered and been attacked because of the poets that have been existing even before him, he sank into silence. He went into silence for almost a decade. But after that, he came out with his work in the year 1842, that is with the work Poems, which was published and was well received by the public and even by the press. Then came the other poems very slowly, the poems such as The Princess, and then we have Medley, followed by Maud and other poems. We have got Idylls of the King, Enoch Arden, and then Demeter and other poems. Now coming to this poem, a few months after the death of Arthur Hallam, Tennyson wrote Ulysses. It's the poem inspired by the loss of his close friend. Now let us look into who Ulysses is. What is the poet trying to tell us? The poem is a long dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue. It's the single speaker who speaks to us. And the poem is written in the form of a poem. I mean to say it's a story. It looks like a story, but then it's written in the form of a poem. Ulysses is a legendary Greek warrior. He is speaking. As I told you, it's a dramatic monologue. There won't be anybody else, but to our naked eyes, it looks as if only one speaker is speaking. But then through the lyrics, we can understand that there are several other people also in the poem, but then we can't see anybody else, and it is dramatic monologue. Ulysses is expressing his displeasure. He's not happy with Ithaca's sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary, dull, people are dull, monotonous in nature. He had a strong yearning for life. He is in chase of excitement and discovery. According to him, it does not benefit anybody simply to sit in Ithaca. He says, simply sitting here in Ithaca with my ancient wife Penelope. Ulysses' wife's name is Penelope. He says, sitting with her, controlling this kingdom, pleasing the people, wouldn't be enough. For one thing, these people have no prior knowledge of me, he says. He says he's a legendary warrior. There is nothing more important in life than to go about their daily routines of eating and sleeping. These people are nothing more than, doing nothing more than eating and sleeping. They haven't reached civilized status yet, he says. He says, I will never be happy unless I travel a lot. Ulysses had a great passion for traveling. He says, I cannot be happy sitting at home like this in Ithaca. I don't want to just sip from life's cup. That means I cannot be satisfied and contented with what I have. I want to empty my cup and then refill it again. That means chasing for the new. Ulysses is fond of new food, new places, and then he could never be satisfied with what he had. He says for the most part of his life, he had anyhow exciting experiences. He had enjoyed them greatly. He had enjoyed them with his friends while sailing through rainstorms. There were stormy seas, but then again he had good time with them too. There were celebrative occasions as a hero. But then he also says curiosity drives me to explore. He wanted to see a lot he saw. He learned more about his people. He knew more about governments, associations, more number of places, more climates all over the world. He is treated with respect everywhere he went. The infamous Battle of Troy was an event in which he took part in the war along with his fellow heroes. As a result of that, he became an intrinsic part of it. It's by very nature, he is like that. It's something like an archway leading to new realms. To put it in a simpler term, getting more and more experiences actually makes one want more again. If we want more, we have to achieve more. Achieving more will actually drive us to increase our ambitions to score more. To stand still cannot be done. It's something like being still. Life has to move. To move is to live. And not only, it's not like simply moving on, it is to live. It is to exist actually. Moving on is to live and exist. Investing time in learning new things and expanding one's knowledge is an important and essential element in fulfilling our happiness. This is what actually we all should know in life. Strive to know more. Try to have something more better. Do not be satisfied and contented with what we have. Contentment enough, okay, that's a different part. But then contentment is quite different with what we actually achieve. This is what even Ulysses wants. Ulysses proclaims his desire for a life which is filled with action, adventures. He draws a comparison between himself and his son. His son is Telemachus. Telemachus is quite different from Ulysses. He says Telemachus is an honorable son, and he has handed over his authority when he was away from Ithaca to rule Ithaca. Moreover, he'll put, that is, his son will put it in the effort, all the efforts to help his people become civilized. But then, anyhow, he expects that they will all become the helpful members of society. He deserves all the qualities that are ahead of him. He knows all his responsibilities. He's a wonderful son, no doubt about it. He'll show much respect to the deities of the family. He's well aware of his fundamental responsibilities. He is such a wonderful person in terms of character. In truth, the strengths and weaknesses complement one another. He does his job, but then Ulysses says, I do mine. He wants a peaceful existence, whereas I want an active one. So this is all about time. The ship actually anchored to the harbor, and it is all set to set sail. Set sail to where? To the open seas. Ulysses says, my marines are those magnificent ones, where there are gallant heroes who battled bravely along with me and accepted those perils and victories as free men who trusted me. Death, without a doubt, will put a full stop to everything. There will be benefits and rewards when we are achieving more. Old age comes to everyone. We will receive benefits and rewards. But at the same time, it also comes with challenges. There is still work to do and goals to be achieved, he says before conclusion. He also adds, Ulysses adds, my friends are great men of courage who fought along with me or the gods in the Trojan War. They will be of a great help to me because they have been with me. It's time to continue exploring the oceans for a new world. Until the last breath of his life, Ulysses says, his objective is to sail beyond the sunset, beyond the stars, and the visible horizon. It's possible we'll have to get sucked up into one of the whirlpools, no doubt about it, because death is inevitable. We can never find our way out. But then it's possible that we will have to make it happy isles. We can also fill our day with happiness because of our new achievement, new adventures. Happy Isles is a mythical place where good men are rewarded after death. So we can have that even if we die there. In our adventure, we can have that happy isles. It's a place. If that is the case, we will meet the greatest of all the Greek warriors in the heaven, it means. Though our strength would dwindle, fade away, we still can shake the earth and heaven with our bravery. We are still those who are despite our advanced age. We do have a strong will. We can strive for new things and new world. Though we remain unbent in spirit, but still we have to be prepared to submit to our actions. Thus, Tennyson's Ulysses is a well-known work of literature. We should admire it for its shape and its subject matter, which makes it well-known. As told already, it's a dramatic monologue in form. Anyhow, we have other poems which are written in dramatic monologue, which we'll be having very soon, like Browning's poetry is there. Thus, the poet Tennyson talks about Ulysses. And finally, the concluding lines would tell us that it's going to be a difficult journey and people, like we all of us, have to die in the process. But then finally, we would definitely go to the happy isles where there will be heroic, great warriors there. They may be frail in the body, but they're strong in the soul. And the poet believes in the notion of seeking, striving, and finding. He uses these three words in the dialogue through the dialogue of Ulysses. Ulysses says, we should strive We should seek and we should find more rather than yielding. So here we end our class today. I hope it's clear to all of you. Give a good reading to the poem. You can find it more interesting to read the lyrics of the poem. That's all for today.